I wanted to start off this video by saying that there is no life better than yours. No matter what your situation looks like. The fact that you got up this morning truly is a blessing. And that's something that should give you the drive to keep pushing forward. Something that I learned with my life and everything that has happened within the last 4 years is it's important to live a purposeful and fulfilling life. I believe that's what God intends, God wants for us, right? He is part of that fulfillment. And I didn't realize that till a couple years ago, but my relationship with God has been such a roller coaster, and that came back to me about a year ago after my accident. And that's something that I would honestly love to talk to you guys about, and maybe it could help you. Just talking about where was I last year? My life, in the span of the last 4 years has been such a journey, and it's been such a roller coaster, and it's been so exciting, it's been so scary, it's been full of all different kinds of emotions. But last year was probably the most impactful year of my life, and it began with me rejecting the life that I had previous to that year. When I first started doing social media, I was a kid who didn't necessarily know what he wanted to do with his life. I ended up going to junior college because I just felt like it was a good place. It was a limbo state in my life. It was kind of like purgatory for me, I guess. I didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't know where my life was heading. And there was countless nights where I would just lay in my bed and just contemplate my life. I wasn't really doing anything with my life that made me feel like I had purpose. And then once I picked up the camera and started making content and really just moving forward in that direction, kind of my purpose started refining. I started figuring out what I wanted to do, and God blessed me with an opportunity where I got sponsored by some companies, and I was making some money, and it wasn't until I received a $500 paycheck that I dropped out of college, and I completely just pursued this very narrow, small little tunnel to the absolute fullest. And thankfully it worked out, but I got so caught up with the lifestyle of it, and I wasn't necessarily growing closer to God, that he just wasn't the center of attention. And I believe that's something that's so important with everything you do. You always have to make God the center of everything. I towards the end of that life, that arc of my life, I started feeling really moved spiritually, and it kind of just came out of nowhere. And then once I finally rejected that life and I chose to take another leap of faith and start paving my own path without having to rely on other outside sources, it was honestly, it was really scary, and I was genuinely scared at first, because going from making very consistent money, having a social media influence, and just having ultimate connections because of that source of money. um life was honestly looking pretty easy, but I just knew it wasn't forever. So I decided to move past it and take the risk on myself again. And it was it was hard, man. It really was. I mean, I wasn't posting on social media because I genuinely had to focus on my I had to focus on stuff outside of social media so I could make money, right? And I ended up, thankfully, from the connections that I made, I ended up being able to work my way into companies and work for them and just gain a bunch of knowledge within the clothing space that I didn't have before. And I was just growing creatively, and I was growing in my craft, and I was growing as a person. And then boom, my accident happened, and it kind of just really it humbled me. For those who don't know, I got in a motorcycle accident, and it definitely could have been fatal, but because of God, like I'm still here today with minimal injuries. And it was something that was so scary for me. And in that point in time of my life, thankfully, I had my beautiful fiance there every step of the way, just encouraging me, taking care of me. And I think it's really important to have a good group of people to be surrounded by. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, successful people. It doesn't have to be people that you can, it doesn't have to be something transactional. It has to be people that genuinely care about you, genuinely love you, and want to see you do great things. And that's I believe that our generation has I don't know, I see a lot of people talk about, oh, like, surround yourself with super successful people and you'll amount to success, which I do agree. But that doesn't mean you have to replace those who love you. It doesn't mean you have to replace those who care about you. There's enough space in your life to involve everyone. Obviously, you want to be smart with who you give your energy and your time to. But overall, it's a matter of love. God is love. God is mercy. And being able to just live how he intends us to live, we get to see the real beauty of life. I used to think that materialistic items would bring me happiness. I've bought the cars, I've bought multiple things, and it's a very short-term dopamine release that doesn't last. I look at people like the richest people on earth. Let's talk about Elon Musk, for example. The guy has the most money in the world, but even that itself isn't enough for him. He wants to take over Mars. That's just one example. Obviously, there's different people who treat it differently. But what I'm trying to say is, from this conversation that we're having, is live a purposeful and fulfilling life. That is the most important thing that we can do. With me, with you watching this video, this is our first time doing this. These experiences in life that we have, whether it's good or bad, really take it in. Really try to see it from a perspective of, what is God trying to tell me? What is God trying to teach me? And by doing that, it really takes away that anxiety or stress that you have, whether it's financial problems, whether it's relationship problems, whether it's problems with your family. I believe using the Lord as a crutch, or a helping hand, or just the leader, it gives you clarity in life. You don't have to envision what the future will look like. Because no matter how you envision it, that's not how God intends it. And I used to look at, I want to talk about 2020 honestly. In 2020, I looked at our generation, our generation, and I thought we were cooked. You know, we were all losing, like we were a godless generation, and there was so much happening in the world, and prices are skyrocketing. The world's collapsing, world wars and politics and all that stuff. And I believe as a generation, we kind of got fed up with all that stuff. And that's something that I've seen this year, honestly, is just a lot of men and women of our generation are coming closer to Christ. And we're we're denying what the system's trying to program us, because we were kind of like the lab rats to these people with what should we teach this generation? How should we teach this generation to live? It's not traditional at all. But I want the key factor of this video to be your life has purpose. You were put on this earth for a reason, and the fact that you wake up in the morning is truly a blessing. Feel that should be your motivation. Going back to what I was saying earlier about dropping out, I'm not telling you to drop out and say screw it and try to find out what you want to do with your life. But whether you're in school or whether you're working in a 9 to 5, just make sure you're doing something with your life that brings you fulfillment, and pray about it, man. I think that's the most important thing, is just pray about it. Talk to God about it. God, He is the answer. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the light. And because of Him, my life has changed for the better. My life has changed ultimately. The stuff that I used to really get riled up about doesn't really affect me anymore. Stress and anxiety, those emotions come and go. They don't stick, because I know that He has a plan for me. And no matter whether the day is good or bad, if I just keep pushing forward and I just keep relying on Him, that everything will be okay. And you will be okay.